Hi, and welcome back to the Card Pool. I'm your host, Stu.
And I'm Kyle.
And today we're going to be doing one of our hidden gem segment from the set of Onslaught this time.
Indeed, yes, it's going to be 10 through 6, so we're going to start from the bottom, work our way up. All these hidden gems are pretty awesome, so I think we should get right down to it. What do you think?
We will, and so I'll start off with my number 10, and just for reference out there, these are without the expensive cards in the set, so we're taking those out of the equation.
Indeed, yes.
But starting off with mine at number 10, a little bit of jank, it's a card called Crown of Suspicion. Now, this is a black aura that costs 2 mana, 1 generic and a black, and it has enchanted creature, goes ahead and gets +2 and -1. And it also has the added tag on it. You can sacrifice this aura to make it so that the enchanted creature, whatever the type is, all other creatures get the caveat that they all get +2 and -1 until the end of the turn. So this is a very unusual kind of card that we see in black, because black really doesn't care about auras too much.
No, not really at all.
And so the fact that this is kind of something like, all right, well, what's so fab about this? Yeah, you get a creature that can boost, but the really cool thing about this is that this is dual purpose. Can go ahead and make it so that your entire army can get a sort of overrun effect, which is in green. You don't ever see that in black. And then also, this can be a potential board wipe for your opponents if they're using some sort of tribal token army, like elves or humans for that example.
Yeah, that is true, Stu. I mean, you pretty much said everything that I would comment on this card, but it is very interesting. You're right. As you said, black doesn't normally care about auras or really enchantments much in general.
Nah.
But yeah, a global boost like that at instant speed is interesting. Certainly an effect we don't really see in black, but you got to be careful because of the -1 toughness. You don't want to get rid of your own creatures.
Yeah.
But the thing that did occur to me, because you have used examples like this in the past, is I realized, oh yeah, you can put this on other people's creatures.
Yeah.
You can still sacrifice it whenever you want because it is your card.
You are the owner of it.
Yeah, exactly. It can be some sort of mass removal spell, like an infest or a mutilate or something like that. I mean, not nearly as large scale as those cards are, but still. Interesting card.
And
yeah.
also, if you have a changeling out, which is all creature types, this is something that can totally utilize the creature type thing and make it so it's a global thing for all players, making it so you have a little bit of your finger on the button, ready for it to go off at your discretion.
Yeah, you know where this would be interesting? Daxos the Returned.
It could work in Daxos.
Because he has it's tribal deck sort of for itself, because you make those spirit enchantment creatures. You can boost them all. This is another enchantment. That might be an interesting place to put this. What do you think?
Well, or Morpheos. You could use that pretty much in any of those examples. Or
Morphon, you mean?
Morphon.
Yeah, the
Changeling Commander.
Yeah.
Or anything that's like a Reaper King that's also using changelings as a sort of like filler. So,
Yeah,
but either way, you guys can let us know in the comments down below if there's any deck that this could shine in. But until we get to that, Kyle, what's your number 10?
All right, well, moving on to my number 10 here is going to be an artifact. Can be used in any deck, but it's called Slate of Ancestry. So it's a 4-mana artifact with one ability. You tap 4 mana to discard your hand, and then draw a card for each creature you control. So this is a really cool card that I have a number of copies of. It's been on my radar for a while. I struggle sometimes with finding a deck that really, really wants this card because I don't necessarily play a whole lot of them myself. But for me, it's always a consideration for decks that play a lot of creatures but struggle with drawing cards. So one that comes right to mind, and not necessarily saying that you would need this, but like a deck like your Rise the Redeemed deck. You make a ton of tokens, and like with a deck like a green and white deck that sometimes can deplete its hand fairly quickly.
Very easily, yeah.
The best part about this card is you don't actually have to discard any cards for this. It's just discard your hand. It doesn't have to be any cards in your hand. You could just say, hey, my hand's empty. I'm going to tap 4, and now I'm going to draw, 8 or 10 cards?
Easily.
That seems pretty good.
Yeah, if you're a deck that goes wide over narrow, this works out really well. Also, there are decks that like to deplete their hand and go wide. So if you're using some sort of Hellbent kind of effect, or like you're in Rakdos colors, it's easy for you to use your whole entire hand due to madness or anything else like that, get those effects, and then to replenish them. This has good combo potential for that fact. And again, the scalability on this is sometimes hard to measure. This isn't a card for every deck, like you're saying.
No, it's difficult. Like I said, it's a lot of times it almost makes the cut, and then it doesn't quite make it.
It depends on what your main source of card draw is, because if you can't use something like a Mentor the Meek, if you're pushing out tokens, like you're using I don't know, dragons, for example, which are usually like 4/4s, 5/5,
Right.
something like that. It's like, all right, well, I can't use those kind of little low-costed kind of things. So what else do I have? And this is definitely a good answer for this. And it also works for like other decks that are like into Reanimate or anything else like this.
Oh
It
yeah,
gives
so
you,
yeah, you want to get rid of stuff from your hand, get new stuff, but also yeah, power things out from the graveyard. Yeah, it definitely works here.
yeah, and this is also a card, it can be on the field for a good bit of time because it's not until they see the true value of it that it will then get evaluated as a threat. So you can get at least one solid use out of this, and this can also be used the turn it comes out. 8 mana is not impossible
Right.
to have out there, especially if you're going ahead and using token strategies. But again, this works for all colors. So if you're doing a merfolk, elves, zombies, whatever, you can still get the added benefit for this, and that's what really makes this card awesome.
Definitely. Well, what's next for yours, Stu? I think we got more card drawing, don't we?
Yeah, I think, yeah, they had a little bit of good supply of this in this set.
Yeah, quite
but
a bit.
At my number 9, we're looking at an enchantment called Overwhelming Instinct. Now, it's a 3-drop enchantment that is 2 generic and a green, and it reads, whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures, draw a card. Now, we see a couple of these in green. Typically, stuff like Elemental Bond, they have their 3-drop enchantments, which have things tacked onto them. To be like, all right, this is how you can draw cards. It's either creatures entering or attacking or targeted. They have a couple options with that. But this is an interesting one, again, if you're going in a wide strategy. All you have to do is just attack. So you can get the added bonus of getting 1 extra card per turn. Now, something like Elemental Bonds, where it's like every time a creature enters play,
Right.
obviously has more value because you can get more triggers off of that.
Yeah, exactly. The thing that bums me out about this card is it's only 1 card per combat. So like if you attack with 3 or more creatures, you know, it's only just draw 1 card every time you do that. I wish that was stronger.
If you have a whole deck focused on the combat step, or if you have something that can go ahead and make it so it has multiple turns, if you have something like an aggravated assault going on,
Yeah.
where it's like you can go ahead and make it so you're doing more and more combat steps, or if you're having more and more extra turns and you're making it so you get the combat damage through, this can also work in that. So it kind of depends because, again, green itself, as a monocolored green, it might not be the strongest in that, but once you start adding blue, black, white, whatever,
Yeah.
it can really start making it so you can get a lot more abusability out of it.
Yeah, it's an interesting card for sure. Definitely a good draw engine, again, for decks with a lot of creatures, and especially like sometimes mono green or green themed decks that can struggle with drawing cards.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd consider it at least.
And it's a good budget
Interesting
option.
card.
Like if you're not buying Sylvan Libraries because you're like, all right, I kind of want to test this out, I'm not putting all this money into this. This is something that can kind of even it out. I'm not saying they're the same value or you're going to get the same effect.
No.
But it's something to kind of see if you're tinkering with an idea of a deck and you kind of need something to fill the void. This could do it potentially. So
That's why we call it a hidden gem.
it is a hidden gem for that world. So that wasn't even a word the last thing I said. But number 9, Kyle, what do you got for us?
All right, well, number 9 for me is going to be Gus Cloak
Hey, there you go.
Savior.
It stinks, doesn't it?
Gus Cloak Savior. Now, this is a white creature. It costs 5 mana to play. Is a 3/4 with flying. And whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, you may untap that creature and remove it from combat. There were a bunch of these kind of cards in this set. They're all like Gus Cloak something, Gus Cloak this,
Yeah,
that,
and
the
they're
other
all
thing.
about attack
They
steps.
attack, and then if they get blocked, they untap and remove themselves from combat so they don't die or take any damage. Gus Cloak Savior is basically the Lord of the Cycle and the rare where it's like, hey, it gives this ability to every single one of your creatures. And honestly, I think it's pretty cool. If anybody's seen the card Reconnaissance in action, you know how kind of busted that can be to get attack triggers off and then not worry about your creatures dying.
Yeah.
This is kind of the same thing.
Or a Dolmen Gate or like a Maze
Right.
of Ith, for example.
Exactly.
Because it's really good at being able to get the attack triggers, is what we were saying before. Like, Narset is a deck where it's all about
Yeah.
attacking to get the value, and sometimes you just really can't risk that because
Right.
it's like,
Exactly.
I've depleted all my resources and now I'm in trouble. This helps you out with that. And so there's so much value with this. White's all about the in-mid attack, like before damage is dealt, while blockers are being declared kind of thing. Something's happening. We're exile
Yeah.
something, we're going to boost something, we're going to do whatever. So this is a white card at its core, and also it's a bird, which is slowly becoming more and more relevant as I'm seeing.
Yeah, it's a soldier, which is a very relevant
that one's
creature type as well.
But birds, we're getting more birds, and you've been screaming about it for a while.
It's true. I would love more birds in Magic. But yeah, this is especially good because it basically gives all the creatures you have that get blocked vigilance. which
Pseudo-vigilance, yeah.
it's pretty cool, because then you have some blockers up. You can basically, with this card in play, swing an entire army at people without fear of losing any creatures. So it goes great in Boros theme decks, especially because Boros decks it's one of the weakest color pairs in Commander, because it focuses almost entirely on aggression, and sometimes you just can't throw away like an army of tokens just to get a couple points of damage in. This mitigates that problem completely.
Very easily. The only thing that's bad about this is it's going to take it out of damage. So life gain, which we see all throughout white, won't be able to go
life
off.
link will not be a thing.
So that's the only real thing I can see being a problem with that in white, because there's so many cards that are about like first strike or life link or double strike or something else like that. But in the realm of everything else, you get it. And honestly, I'm willing to not gain a little life for that effect. And I mean,
save some creatures, definitely.
The only thing I really wish is I just kind of wish this guy had a bigger body for 5 mana.
Yeah, it's not all that impressive. 3/4 with flying for 5.
I mean,
right.
a 4/5 with this still would have been fine to be a rare in my book. But again,
probably would have. Yeah.
Older set, older times are like, you can't do too much with one card. Like, all right, Grandpa, calm down.
Well, I think we have another white card up next on the agenda, don't we?
We do actually.
Right.
So for my number 8, we're looking at an old school classic called Ablation.
Totally stole this from me, by the way.
I chose it first, so it's definitely mine. It's called Ablation. If you haven't seen it before, it's a great card for spot removal. It costs 3 mana, 2 generic, and a white for an instant that makes it so that you target a non-land permanent and it gets shuffled into its owner's library. And then you go ahead and that person goes and draws 2 cards. So this is great for spot removal for a variety of reasons, because you can hit any permanent that's not a land. And for being how white is very known for having its Sword to Plowshares or Path to Exile, this is pretty much the realm of something else before we had Generous Gift out there.
Yeah, which I guess you could have an argument as to which one is better. I would say Generous Gift is better.
It's not even an argument, man. It's more or less like, it's like you tip your hat to be like, all right, Ablation, thank you for your service. I'm going to take over now. It's like one of those things.
This used to be better before the rules were changed for Commander, and tucking the Commander into the library was a very real strategy to win games. This used to be able to do that, and that made it a very valuable and great card to play in Commander, because now of the rule change where if your Commander goes into any other zone, you can just put it back in the command zone. It doesn't work that well anymore.
It's not as crazy as it used to be, but this is good offensively and defensively as well.
Oh, for sure.
If you have some sort of piece out on the field that you need to keep, and I mean, it could be a variety of things, whether it's your commander, an essential enchantment, an artifact, a planeswalker, whatever, or even if it's something that's about to die, you're like, all right, I don't have any cards in my hand. I'm willing to put this away to get 2 cards in my hand, no matter what it is.
Right.
And inherently, it can be a saving grace just for the fact that you're getting, well, hand value.
Yeah, or if you just want to draw cards. Like, this is a very important card in my Feather the Redeemed deck, because targeting your own stuff, you get the card back. Hey, I can lose like a token or 2, draw some cards. In Boros, you need all the draw you can get. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, that's actually a great example for all that. Or if you have anything that has draw triggers, like if you have something like, I don't know, a Fawn of Mythos kind of kicking in, where it's like, all right, you can go ahead and make somebody draw extra cards, and it just hurts them, and that's why they die. So it has different realms where it could be good, but just for flat out white generic, hey, I'm getting rid of something, it still worked. It's a great budget option, and I mean, again, if you're using Generous Gift, why not have a, well, not going for the A, you can at least take the B with it as well, so yeah.
I almost always consider this card in a deck that has white in it, no matter what the circumstances is, just because it's powerful spot removal. But it usually loses out. The more colors you're playing, it generally starts losing out to
like
multicolored options, like a Vindicate, like an Anguished Unmaking, Utter End,
so
those
many
kind
of
of
those
cards,
things,
which are strictly speaking better.
And it's just adding black. Add any other color onto something else, it scales.
Yeah, but there are things to be said for putting things back into the deck sometimes rather than destroying them.
Yeah, it can save you from getting milled out. So, again, take it for what you want. It's something that's... It hasn't aged the best, but it still works.
Serviceable. Still very serviceable.
Gets the job done.
Yeah.
But enough about this guy. We kind of said everything we could about this. But for your number 8, Kyle, what do you got flying at us?
It's one of our favorite cards. But number 8 for me is going to be going to a red card this time, and I'm going to have a lot of red cards in this review and the next one too. But it's going to be Goblin Sharpshooter for me this time. So it's a 3-mana 1/1 Goblin. Doesn't untap during your untap step, but whenever a creature is put into a graveyard from play, it untaps. And it has the tap ability to deal 1 damage to any target. these days. The creature or player, any target, has pretty much been errated on almost all these cards. So anyway, the reason I chose Goblin Sharpshooter, I don't really play this card much anymore, but back when I was first starting Commander, I had a couple of decks that used this guy.
Goblin tribal heavy kind of stuff.
Well, there was that, but also things that focused on creatures dying a lot. And this card is nuts because it can just machine gun down a board full of tokens.
Hence why the picture's like that.
Exactly, and can also combo with a bunch of different cards to create infinite damage on the table quite easily. So this is kind of an insane card. Doesn't look like it should be, but it is.
Well, yeah, it's very simple on the surface, but it's kind of also one of the things. It's like if you go ahead and you give this thing Death Touch, it just pretty much kill
every
the
creature.
board,
Yeah.
and it's still untapped, and you can ping to the face.
Exactly.
It's a very aggressive card. It works in tribal. It works on stuff that's outside of tribal, which is what you're saying.
It's a combo card, essentially.
It's just old school, good kind of feeling stuff. I mean, take what you want out of it. Even if you're not using goblins and you want to use like a red burn kind of scenario, this also works as well.
Yeah, well, it's like Intruder Alarm, you know, because like whenever you tack the untap ability for basically free onto a creature, bad stuff is going to go down. So
well, who's the red commander you just put together?
Torban. Yeah.
So like you go ahead, you tap this, it does 3 damage.
Exactly.
So it's just like a free lightning bolt to
Yeah.
it. So I mean, there's a whole bunch of different things you can go ahead and put with this. This is. It again, like you said, it looks simple. It's easily tutorable in a variety of things in just mono red, and that's pretty hard to say about a lot of cards.
And it's actually deceptively very scary. So definitely a card to take note of.
So I actually have a red card coming up.
Ooh, what is
we
that?
don't plan this, actually. We just actually order them however we want, and then it goes from there. So sometimes this works out. Sometimes it's not even close. But my number 7 coming forward, I'm going to need you to say it. It's Tephra Door? Tephra Door?
Yeah, I guess so. Interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, all right, you guys can argue with my speaking in the description below or comments. But either way, it's a 5-drop beast. It costs 4 generic and a red for a 4/5 body. And it reads, whenever a creature deals damage to this guy, he in turn will deal that much damage to that creature. And whenever a spell deals damage to this guy, in turn it deals that much to its controller. So this is very interesting because it makes it so you're very disincentivized to block this or attack into it, because even if this thing can't go ahead and kill it on its own, the damage that's being put to it should be able to kill the creature that's coming at it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, or try to burn it out with any kind of effect of a card. Like, imagine a Blasphemous Act hitting this guy.
Yeah, you don't
that's
want
not, that's going to be bad news.
So it's kind of got a repercussion, but a repercussion that scales more or less to, like, combat and outside of it. So it's very unique in that regard.
When, ironically enough, it makes it terrible in red decks, because all the board wipes are damage based.
Like chain
you don't want to play it
reaction.
into this card.
Yeah, so it's interesting for how it works. I don't think this is a card just to sit in mono red, but if we are keeping it in mono red, like this can also be really good and really scary with stuff when you go ahead and double the damage.
Oh, absolutely.
Like especially if you're going ahead and using, like, I don't know, Pits of Wrath or whatever.
Yeah, Furnace of Wrath. Dictated to Twin Gods, all those things. Yeah.
And this can also work with some Beast Tribal. So
yeah, it can.
Yeah,
which needs to be a bigger thing than it is. It really does.
Well, they just need better beasts. We haven't really gotten some good beasts that are like.
Yeah, there's a few, but there's just
they're
no
spaced
cohesive
out.
strategy
Yeah,
at all.
Maybe that's the next kind of thing we'll
I
get.
would love that. But you know what this reminds me of? Enrage. This reminds me of Enrage, because it basically is a proto-early version of Enrage.
Maybe. I don't know if it's exactly. Yeah, I guess it'd be a stepping stone towards it. I can give you that.
Yeah, so I wonder if this card had any influence on that. I don't know. I would have to look that up. But it's an interesting idea. I guess it could be.
I'll give you that. But yeah, just something that spoke to itself to me being like, it could really be big and scary.
It could be.
And actually, if Repercussion's out, it deals damage twice then inherently to a creature. So it would deal damage for the creature's attack onto it, which would go back to the owner.
Yeah,
and then the
Repercussion
initial.
And Tephra Door. Yeah.
So
yeah,
that's a double trigger right there.
A double whammy.
A double, combo right there. Cheese-filled pretzel. But either way, on to your number 7, Kyle. What do you got?
All right. Well, number 7, let's change things up a little bit. I've got a black card here. It's called Doomed Necromancer. This is a 3-drop 2/2 Cleric Mercenary.
That's odd.
And yeah, kind of weird. But especially because it looks like a zombie in the picture. I don't know what's going on with that. But anyway, so you tap a black and this guy to sacrifice him and return target creature from your graveyard to play. So this is really, really simple. It's basically a reanimate spell on the body of a creature, which up until this point, there were a few cards that did this, but was kind of rare.
Yeah, spaced out.
So yeah, so this is a really interesting one because it actually sacrifices itself, goes to the graveyard. Some of the other ones like exiled themselves and
which is
did
how it
other
should
things
be.
like that.
Honestly, they should be exiled.
Probably. But yeah, this one I think is very, very interesting because having a reanimation spell is great. Having it on the body of a creature that can then be reused much more easily over and over again is even better.
Yeah, I read this pretty much, it's Magus of Reanimate, because they have a whole bunch of those, and it literally looks just like it. The only real downside of this thing is it's going to take a turn for it to go off, and early game, if you don't have anything in the grave, this is going to be a little lame to have in your hand.
Not necessarily. You know, there are a lot of ways you can give haste to all your creatures, so this is a very real possibility.
It's possible depending what you add to it. I'm staying in the realm of just solely black for right now. So that's the only thing I am not a fan with it. But the rest of this, bring it out to the battlefield for 3. Inherently for 4 mana, you can get something that's like, I don't know, a Razaketh or anything like that. So
exactly.
It's really big. It can really scale, and especially with how fast actually you can go ahead and play something like Entomb or like Buried Alive or any of those other kind of cards. It can scale quick. Again, you need to have that stuff with this guy to go with it, but it also triggers off stuff for like Grave Pact, everything else. So this is very black at its core, and it works, and it can really get the job done.
Yeah, well, the fact that this is an activated ability as well can be really relevant because decks like Lazav the Multifarious that like to copy creatures from the graveyard, you can use this over and over again to have a removal spell, reanimate spell coming from your graveyard.
Yeah.
And then also Necrotic Ooze, another creature that copies all activated abilities.
Yeah.
Works super well with this.
But again, you also got to lose the Necrotic Ooze then, so you might not even be willing to do that. But it makes it so if you're going to be losing the creature, you have a great reason to like, all right, I'll sacrifice it in response, and I'll get value out of it. So it still disincentivizes your opponent from going ahead and doing something to your board. You were like, don't mess with this.
Exactly. But you're right, it is a little bit slower than just a standard reanimate would be. But whenever spell abilities get put on creatures, I tend to take notice because that can be a great big advantage to have in a lot of cases.
Like I said, it's Magus of Reanimate. But either way, on to my next card. This is going to be number 6 and the final card on my list for this video. And we're going to be looking at a land called Contested Cliffs. Now, it passes the vanilla test. You can tap it for 1 generic or for a Gruul. Is that Gruul?
Green
and red. You go ahead and you tap this, choose target beast you control and target creature an opponent controls. Each creature deals damage to its power to each other, so aka fight before fight existed. So obviously this is really good. Having this on a land that doesn't come into play tapped, you can just go ahead and have an answer to go ahead and remove something out there that you just don't like. And the fact that it's in beasts, they're big. They're at least 4 attacks starting out, 4 or 5, if not bigger.
Yeah, like I was saying, Beast Tribal really needs to be a thing, and if it ever becomes like a viable commander strategy, you should absolutely play this card because having a free removal spell on a land is awesome.
And just to put this in perspective, so like we see dinos, which aren't beasts for whatever reason, but if they were beasts and you had this in the deck, think of how scary that is. That makes it so pretty much you have a free, I don't know, Doomblade almost out there on the field that you can just go ahead and recur over and over again. But again, to note, this also works with changelings and anything else that has beast tacked onto it or has been oracled over time. So this is something that can be really good. Obviously better in a tribal sense, but again, cards get reprinted and we get new archetypes all the time. So this is something I'd say to buy now while it's cheap before it goes up because...
Yeah, this is a card I could definitely see going through the roof at some point in the future if the right cards get printed.
Yeah, and this is an old set. Onslaught really hasn't been reprinted much for most of the stuff, and this definitely is just OG here.
Yeah, well this card, it got reprinted once actually in one of the earlier commander decks. Just once though.
Oh yes, it did.
Yeah.
You are right. All right.
Just once though.
But still,
my comment stands. I think this could definitely be a money card at some point in the future.
So get your full copies from the old school set now, and then you'd be like, all right, for $5, I end up making 300. That's a big scale.
Who knows?
Who knows? At least $30, you'd be stoked about it, right? But anyway, on to your card, Kyle. What is the final one for this video?
All right, well, number 6 for me is, well, you thought you needed lands to make mana. Okay, let's see how that works out. Brightstone Ritual is my card, and
You know
I
what
actually did not even...
You need lands to play this card, so you still need lands to produce
Not necessarily.
mana.
You don't necessarily.
All right, how you get
As
mana?
I will prove later on.
All right.
So this is a 1 mana red instant that has a simple effect. Add 1 red to your mana pool for each goblin in play. Do you know how silly this is? Just think about it. It's a dark ritual in red, but it's like 1,000,000 dark rituals potentially in 1 card.
Whoa.
It's crazy.
It depends. All right, so the scalability is the same thing we've been saying for other cards, like your first one for this list, for example. It depends on what you have, because this could be totally a dead card in your hand, but if your commander is at least a goblin, you can get at least 1 mana out of this if it's truly what you need, but that doesn't add up. You're trading 1 mana for 1 mana
But
to get 1
usually,
mana.
I mean, yeah, the goblins are all about swarming, all about building an army. Especially, like a deck like Krenko, any one of the Krenkos really, making all those tokens.
No, they multiply 100%.
Yeah, even a Grenzo deck that focuses on some Goblin Tribal. I played one of those for a while. This is just really, really silly card. It puts Dark Ritual to shame.
Yeah, this is probably, I'd say, one of the better rituals, provided the field
You're playing
has
goblins.
yeah. Yeah, as opposed, well, I don't know. I still say, what's the red one that's not Seething Song? It's the
Mana Geyser.
Mana Geyser,
which is really good
which can
too.
for 5 mana give you usually like at least 20.
Oh yeah, easily.
So,
but yeah, obviously this isn't really good anywhere else. But can you imagine how silly this is in an actual Goblin deck? And there are other cards that I've seen over time. And this is the common, mind you, that I see cards like this, and like Goblin Warstrike is another one, and I'm like, wait, how did this get printed again, and why does nobody play it?
Yeah, well,
it's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, you said it, but yeah, it's a card. I think it's definitely been overlooked. It is definitely warrant of the hidden gem status that we're giving it. And if you disagree, let us know and just say, Kyle, you stink in the comments, and we'll count those up later. No, or just say that card's not really a gem. Either way, it's all good. We'll listen to you for that. But that is going to conclude our list for the first part of Onslaught. Be sure to check out our second part, part 2, next week, which will be coming out, of our 5 through 1, which will be the tippy top of the fantastic finds we have.
Indeed, the cream of the crop, as it were.
And they rise to the top.
Yeah, and you can follow us on social media if you want to learn more. Reddit, Tapped Out page. We have Facebook and Twitter as well, all at the handle The Card Pool. And of course, you can just email us at mtgthecardpool@gmail.com.
But until then, I'm Stu.
And I'm Kyle.
And we'll see you next time at the Card Pool. Mana for that.
You don't? I will prove it. Wait,
So
just wait for it.
wrong.
Wait for it.